Okay, well, I think all's aboard that's coming aboard. Hello and welcome. I'm Richard Kravitz, director at UCCS. It's great to see all the students and academic and administrative staff, as well as our many guests, or at least our 6 guests. This is the first session of our undergraduate research showcase. It's a highlight of every quarter because we get to celebrate the accomplishments of all of you, our UCCS students. The focus really is on you. You've worked really hard this term, we know, under still somewhat strange circumstances, and we're all adjusting, but you've demonstrated a lot of verve, a lot of tenacity, and we really celebrate and appreciate that. We also appreciate the efforts of your internship hosts who have made their offices available for you to gain valuable work experience and see how government and nonprofits actually function. And we're really looking forward to these presentations. We do each time because they're the culmination of so much effort and so much learning, much of which I'm sure neither you nor we could have anticipated at the beginning. So we're really looking forward. We're excited. Let's go.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. So the format today will be that each student will present. After the student presents, we will take one question from their internship host site. If there isn't a question from their internship host site, then we will turn the question over to our academic team. We will have an open Q&A at the end of the session as time permits. And our first student that will lead us off is Rosa Montiel, and she interned this term with the California Department of Public Health.
Thank you. I'm starting my slideshow. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties, but there we go. Hi, my name is Rosa Montiel, and sexually transmitted diseases continue to rise at an alarming rate. 1 in 5 Americans have a sexually transmitted disease, or STD, costing over $16 billion in 2020 alone. My research question is, STD, are public schools failing kids when it comes to sexual health? Proposed relationship is the independent variable is the STD rate. The dependent variable are the condom availability programs, or CAPS, and Assembly Bill 329, the California Healthy Youth Act, which passed in 2015. I hypothesize that high school aged individuals had lower STD rates prior to the implementation of AB 329 and the CAPS in public schools. To study and test my hypothesis, I collected data from the CDC, School-Based Health Alliance, CDPH, and the UCS Department of Nursing. I will concentrate my research on female syphilis cases. My findings: California has experienced a steep increase in syphilis cases among females and congenital syphilis, which means the disease is transferred to the baby. From 2012 to 2018, female syphilis cases increased nearly 550%. And congenital syphilis cases increased nearly 900%. Most cases reported in Central and Southern California. The CAPS program can increase condom use, but more evaluations are needed on the impact of STD rates. The misuse of condoms and the fail ratio finding especially can be up to 40% according to some findings, especially when alcohol and drugs are used. Policy suggestion: legislation can help play a key role, yet in order to be effective, a coalition of parents, schools, and health professionals must be more involved in helping bridge the gap from home to school for a more effective outcome. Without this bridge coming together, it can be very difficult to decrease the STD rates. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Rosa. And so if there's a question from the California Department of Public Health, if you want to go ahead and just raise your hand, and I will go ahead and allow you to talk on my end, and you just need to go ahead and unmute on your end. And if not, then we'll go over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Kravitz.
Hi, Rosa. Thanks for that presentation. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what, I know you were limited in time, but what does Assembly Bill 329 actually do, and what made you think that it would reduce STD rates?
That's a great question, Dr. Kravitz. Assembly Bill 329 really outlines what type of sexual health or the STD information will be given to students. It outlines when it starts in middle school and throughout high school, and it's supposed to teach or give information based on appropriate age, the information in order for them to be cognizant of what I guess pitfalls are with engaging in sexual activity with and without condoms and those types of education. And of course, the condom availability program. So I tried to bridge the gap between the legislation and what has currently been available for over 15 years in the schools, which is access to the prophylactics.
Thank you, Dr. Kravitz, for the question, and thank you, Rosa, for your presentation and answer. So our next student today is Erin Sanchez, who also interned with the California Department of Public Health.
Cool. Hello, everyone. California Latinos, as I'm sure you guys are all aware, totaled more than half of all COVID infections and over 45% of all confirmed deaths, with official estimates reporting that this population is 2.3 times more likely to die of COVID-19. Interestingly, California Latinos are also equally as likely to lack a bachelor's degree or higher. Could this absence of post-secondary education be a root cause? My name is Erin Sanchez, and in this research project, I analyzed the effect of educational achievement on COVID-19 mortality rates within California's Latino population using publicly available data from the American Community Survey and the California Department of Public Health. I initially hypothesized that higher educational achievement would significantly decrease the likelihood of death by COVID-19. So to test this hypothesis, I conducted a county-level analysis on the proportion of each population that has a high school diploma or above and that has a bachelor's degree or above. I also included median household income, gender, and of course, Latino ethnicity. I ran two separate multiple regressions on the two respective educational populations, combined with these other variables to break this down further. What I found was that across the state, low high school completion rates were strongly correlated with higher COVID-19 mortality, but a bachelor's degree had a weak effect. Counties with larger populations of four-year degrees or above, in many instances, experienced similar mortality rates as counties with small four-year populations. There's also a very strong correlation between low high school completion rates and larger Latino populations. The regression model, however, shows that Latino ethnicity is the only statistically significant predictor of higher COVID-19 mortality, as it somewhat overshadows the effects of high school education. Income and gender were not significant predictors of COVID-19 mortality. The data therefore suggests, the data therefore disproved my initial hypothesis that higher education does not, in fact, decrease the likelihood of death by COVID-19, because post-secondary education attainment only has stronger ties to higher median income. If future policies were developed to try to reduce COVID-19 mortality from an education-based approach, they should not focus on increasing the number of bachelor's degrees, but should instead focus on making sure all of our California youth are completing their high school education, especially if they are Latino. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin, for your great presentation today. And so if there is a question from the audience, if you want to just go ahead and raise your hand. There's a question from the CDPH. All right, and then if not, a question from our academic team. Sharif.
Hi, Erin. Really cool project. I was wondering what the policy implications of your findings might be.
Absolutely. I personally do not think that we should continue with the idea that college education is the right thing, that everyone should go to get a college degree, as long as like we're seeing that as an answer to health disparities. We should instead focus on increasing the number of high school diplomas we're giving out each year and our retention rates for high school students.
All right,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Sheree, for that question. And thank you, Aaron, again for your presentation today. And so our next student is Carlos Torres, who interned this term with the Cal Air Resources Board.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks great. Thank you, Carlos.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Torres, and I'll be speaking to you today about electric vehicles and carbon dioxide levels in California. Transportation makes up more than 50% of California's greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases affect climate, like in California, the Sierra Nevada snowpack has disappeared, water is becoming scarce, the severity of wildfires are increasing, and most importantly, public health is at stake. So my research question asks, is registration of electric vehicles, EVs, related to greenhouse gas emissions in California? My hypothesis is, as registered EVs increase, the levels of CO2, carbon dioxide, will decrease. My research is a comparative case study of California, New York, and Florida from 2010 to present. My independent variable is registration of electric vehicles. My dependent variable is million metric tons of CO2. I find that in California, figure 1, CO2 levels dip in 2010 to 2013, but begin to increase in 2014. In New York, figure 2, CO2 levels decrease and increase in the first 5 years, but there's an overall incline over the decade. In Florida, figure 3, there's also an overall increase of CO2 levels, and in all 3 states, EVs are increasing. In figure 4, in figure 4, the scatter plot shows as the EV's percentage of total vehicles increase, so the CO2 levels. The graph uses an exponential x-axis because the distribution would be too hard to see since New York and Florida have significantly less EVs than California. Although my results do not support my hypothesis, it's important to note EVs are a small percentage of total vehicles, and other factors exist that contribute to increasing CO2 levels. I recommend local governments invest in local renewable energy and infrastructure for EVs. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carlos, for that great presentation. And so if there is someone from Cal ARB who would like to go ahead and ask a question. Great, Susan. Or just unmuted you and you just need to unmute. They're perfect.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Carlos, great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm just curious, since a lot of your work at CARB has been focused on legislation, if the results of your research have any indications for future legislation around electric vehicles or greenhouse gas reduction that you might recommend.
I think definitely investing in infrastructure that can provide more clean energy that charges these EVs will be a great legislation to pass in California and perhaps all other states in the country.
Great, thank you so much, Susan, for that question, and then Carlos for your presentation and the response today. So thank you. And so our next student is Rodrigo Garcia, who interned this term with the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rodrigo Garcia, and I will be presenting on crowding amongst farm workers. Vulnerable populations are often the most impacted by events like California's current housing crisis. One of California's most impacted populations are farm workers. A 2018 report focused on California's northern central coast shows that over 45,000 units of farm worker housing are needed to alleviate crowding in the region, while only 900 units are expected to be built in the next 10 years. Most farm workers in the area live above the HUD's definition of crowding of 2 people per room. In my research, I looked to determine whether migrant farm workers are more susceptible to crowded housing than non-migrant workers. Further, I want to determine if farm workers in California live in more crowded housing than farm workers outside of California. To answer my question, I used the National Agricultural Workers Survey from 1998 to 2018 To measure my variables, I used questions that asked respondents about their migrant status, how many people per room reside in their residence, and where they took the survey. Based on the data, migrant farm workers are more likely to live in crowded housing than non-migrant workers. They're expected to have over 0.6 people more per room than non-migrant workers when adjusting for confounders like income and legal status. However, trends show that the gap between migrant and non-migrant workers has closed over the past decade. California farm workers are also more likely to live in crowded housing. However, they only deviate about 0.3 people per room from the national average. According to the data, even those farm workers with the lowest rates of crowded housing live with 4 people per room, twice the HUD's definition of crowding. So to address this, greater emphasis needs to be put on the housing needs of farm workers. Subsidies can be provided to rural farming regions that identify sites of old migrant housing centers for redevelopment. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Rodrigo, for that great presentation. And so if there is a question from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, we'll go ahead and take a question from our academic team. Professor Quila.
Hi, Rodrigo. I just had a question about your figure 1. I was wondering if you had any idea as to why California and the eastern region of the U.S. have higher levels of overcrowding, while the Southwest has less considered in terms of that. I was wondering if you had any ideas why that was.
I think it might be a result of, I guess, just the industries in the area. I think the East, like these regions, the East as defined by the National Agricultural Workers Survey includes areas like Virginia and other Eastern states that are like like North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee, which might have more factory farming. And California has like a huge factory farming industry. And I think these industries sometimes lead to more crowded housing.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Professor Quila, for that question. And thank you, Rodrigo, for that great presentation. And so our next student today is going to be Sofia Hernandez, who interned this term with the California Environmental Protection Agency.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I did my research on public opinion of prescribed burnings in California. So in 1907, the U.S. Forest Service came out against the use of prescribed burns, kicking off an era of fire exclusionary practices. More than a century later, the country, specifically California, is grappling with severe wildfires, partially due to the exclusion of fire from the landscape. Has public perception of prescribed burning shifted towards a more favorable view? I hypothesize that California adults between the ages of 18 and 44 have a more positive view of the practice compared to adults 45 and older. I conducted a survey in November 2021 using age as my independent variable and support for prescribed burns as my dependent variable. Results from my survey show that age is not a factor when it comes to support for prescribed burns, as both age groups supported the practice at similar rates. However, there are minimal differences in perceived risks associated with prescribed burns, and there are slight differences with the level of comfortableness to let different entities conduct prescribed burns. Results from the survey can be used to ask for more federal funding to conduct these burns and rely more on CAL FIRE and tribal governments rather than private companies to do these burns. Moving forward, adults from Northern and Southern California should be surveyed to see if there are regional differences in public opinion of the practice. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sophia, for that great presentation. And if there was a question from Cal EPA, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, we'll go ahead and take a question from our academic team. All right, Professor Betters.
Excellent job, Sophia. I really like this presentation quite a bit. I've talked about it lots of times, but I really like that infographic you have on the left there. I was wondering, though I think we've also talked about this a little bit. Do you think your results would change at all if you looked at your results in not just across age, but also across maybe gender or education or something like that?
I think they would. That is something that I will be talking about in my research paper, doing a different doing another study looking at age, maybe political party and gender, as well as where individuals reside in California, to see if there is any differences in public opinion of this practice.
Excellent, thanks.
Great, thank you. So thank you, Professor Butters, for that question. And thank you, Sophia, again, for that great presentation. And so our next student is Magnolia Mughal, and she interned with the California Environmental Protection Agency.
Hello. All right, so I did my research on the impacts of climate catastrophes on Mexican migration. In 2021, the US saw a 20-year record high in the number of people stopped at the US-Mexico border. My research hopes to answer the question of in what way that this increase can be contributed to increasingly severe climate disasters experienced over the last 40 years, especially considering that Mexico beat its previous national and territorial heat records earlier in this summer. I hypothesize that data will show that as water-related climate disasters, such as drought and storms, increase in severity and frequency, migration across the US-Mexico border will also increase. I first looked at climate data on precipitation and high temperatures over the last 40 years in Mexico, alongside data on climate-induced displacement and overall economic insecurity from the World Meteorological Organization and Pew during that time. I also completed a comparative study with UNHCR's data on displacement and how migration patterns changed during or after Hurricane Eta in Mexico of 2020. While my findings point to a strong correlation between rising temperatures and precipitation and increased migration, there's not enough data to consistently and definitively say that migration patterns are increasing as climate disasters increase. However, my analysis on data from the World Meteorological Organization and the UN found a likely causal link between climate change related disasters and impact on economic security. My analysis of this research found that agriculture and manufacturing sectors are both the most affected by climate disasters and the sectors that the majority of Mexican migrants came to the US from. I also found a large spike in the number of migrants coming into the US from Mexico in times during and right after Hurricane Eta. My initial policy suggestion would be to add those who are experiencing high temperatures, storms, and droughts to the officially accepted definition of a refugee, or adopt climate refugee as its own official and accepted definition in order to make it easier to migrate and for more people to be widely accepted across borders. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Magnolia, for that great presentation today. And so if there's a question from Callie P, if you want to go ahead and just raise your hand, I can go ahead and call on you. And if not, the academic team. All right, Sharif.
Hi, Magnolia. A really interesting presentation. I was wondering, you say that climate affects migration, but what is the sort of intervening variable? Meaning, what does climate affect that may induce people to migrate to the United States?
Yeah, so I found that economic insecurity and loss is definitely the biggest factor that influences migration overall, just in general. And so with climate related disasters, those have a huge impact on especially lower income households and their like people who work in the agriculture manufacturing sectors. There's a ton of data that point to increases in property damage from those things, and also just general financial loss and job loss, as well as even medical bills increasing.
All right, great. Thank you, Sharif, for that question. And again, Magnolia, thank you for that great presentation today. And so our next student is Armandeep Kaur, and she interned with the Senate Office of Research this term.
Is everyone able to see the presentation?
Yes, it's just that you need to just go ahead and be on the start slide. Oh, perfect. There we go. Thank you, Armandeep. Looks great.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'll be presenting on race and opinion, California governor's handling of the COVID-19 response. Data shows that even though Latinos account for 39% of the total population of California, they disproportionately account for 46% of confirmed deaths due to COVID. This is similar to impact as well. I asked the question as to whether Black and Hispanic individuals are more likely to disapprove of Governor Newsom's COVID-19 response than white individuals. I hypothesized that Black and Hispanic individuals are more likely to disapprove of Governor Newsom's COVID-19 response in comparison to white individuals. I looked at the ANA survey and utilized descriptive and inferential, and variable was race, and my dependent variable was the governor's handling of the pandemic. I also conducted a multivariate regression using race, employment sector, partisanship, and political ideology. Finally, it's to be false, and showed that white individuals are more likely individuals. Additionally, regression results show that race does not play a statistically significant role on one's opinion regarding. However, partisanship does. Republicans were 58% more likely to disapprove of governor's COVID-19 response than Democrats. These results show a partisan rather than a racial rift regarding the current COVID-19 policies and emphasize the need for a bipartisan effort to make COVID-19 combative efforts more transparent while also stopping the spread of false information. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Armandeep. And so I know that the Senate Office of Leadership wasn't able to make it today, so if we can go ahead and just go straight to the academic team for a question. All right, Ginger.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting, and very interesting research here. And I was wondering if you think that the results would be different if you looked at approval of the governor in contrasting urban versus rural regions of California, if you think that would make a difference here at all, and if you could just give us a sense of what you think it might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think if like partisanship plays a role, and then like the partisanship varies from like urban to rural, tend to be more conservative versus urban. Data to know whether urban settings and things vary in their like partisanship ability. I think it would impact the approval rate.
Great, thank you so much, Ginger, for that question, and Armandeep for your great presentation today. And so our next student is Emily Zhao, and she interned this term with Environment California.
Can you see?
Yes, looks great. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emily, and 1 in 5 adults in the US face mental illness every year. Despite this, stigma against mental illness is still widespread. Stigma of mental illness negatively impacts quality of life and likely stems from cultural upbringing and acts as a barrier towards seeking treatment. My hypothesis is Asian men will have the highest rates of stigma of mental illness. I used data from California Health Interview Survey, also known as CHIS, to do a large-end study and analyze which demographic groups seek treatment and what stigma affects each group the most. Using data from 2020, CHIS includes categories needed treatment for mental health and sought treatment for mental health, as well as main reason for not getting help online, which includes categories do not think they need it and wanted to handle the problem on their own. Both categories count for stigma against mental illness and seeking treatment. My findings suggest Asian men are most affected by stigma because they seek treatment at the lowest rate out of the groups analyzed, with 61.5% of them not seeking treatment despite having a need for it. Men also consistently sought treatment at lower rates and answered stigma-related questions at higher rates compared to women in the same racial group. There were no consistent findings regarding federal poverty level, and so differences are unlikely to be due to income and most likely due to race. Asian and Latino men also answered do not think I need it at the highest rates, which shows they are most affected by stigma towards mental illness, while women in all racial groups answered wanted to handle problem on their own at higher rates than men. And these findings are really interesting because it shows men are more likely to deny their mental health as an issue, while women are more likely to accept the issue, but then feel stigma when seeking help. My policy suggestion is targeted mental health campaigns towards Asians, Latinos, and men to encourage more of them to recognize their mental health and seek treatment. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Emily, for that great presentation. And if there is a question from Environment California, great, Lizzie Nickerson.
Yeah, hi, Emily. Great presentation. I'm really excited to see this. I know we've been talking about it all quarter. I had a question about how you define stigma or the consequences of stigma, I guess. Are these people who totally forgo mental health treatment because of the stigma, or maybe just don't get, the adequate amount of mental health treatment? If you could just speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I got the stigma data from one of the questions, which was main reason for not getting help online. And that included a bunch of different reasons, which included like cost, other like distrust of the healthcare system and distrust of like not having time, distrust of like technology. And so all of those were available for people to check as the main reason for not getting help. And I just took these two because I felt that they were the most stigma related of mental health.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Lizzie Nickerson, for that great question. And Emily, thank you so much for that great presentation. And I'm just going to go ahead and give just a second here to go ahead and have Sua stop our recording for today.